Alright, back with another deity description video. This time I wanted to go over the god Ninazu. His name is Ninazu. Now, Ninazu is a Mesopotamian, well, it says Mesopotamian god of the underworld. He was also associated with snakes and vegetation, and with time acquired the character of a warrior god. He was frequently associated with Ereshkigal, goddess, queen of the underworld, either as a son, husband, or simply a member of the same category of underworld deities. Now, Ninazu, I believe, means Lord Healer. A Sumerian, it's Nin-Asu. His original cult centers were Enegi and Eshnuna. Though in the latter city, he was gradually replaced by a similar deity called Tishpak. So Tishpak, I believe Tishpak is actually a deity similar in nature or character to maybe Marduk, because doesn't Tishpak kind of become the king of the gods in the kingdom of Eshnuna? I don't know if Ninazu was thought of as that type of deity as well or not. Maybe we can find out here. His cult declined after the Old Babylonian period, though in the city of Ur, where it was introduced from an Enegi, he retained a number of worshippers even after the fall of the last Mesopotamian empires in the Achaemenid period. I didn't know that. Somebody on here told me that earlier, and that got me interested in doing the video on him. That his cult outlasted, that his cult remained even after the fall of the last Mesopotamian empires. I had no idea that Ninazu's cult, lasted so long. I had no idea about that. That's pretty fascinating. So, okay. Let's see here. And I also wanted to do this to figure out how related Ninazu and Tishpak are to each other. Is there any kind of connection between the two? So let's go to his character and iconography here. According to Julia M. Asher Grieve, Ninazu was initially considered a high-ranking local god, similar in rank to Ningirsu. It's Ninurta, another name for Ninurta. I believe that's from, his name has Sumerian origin, okay, and can be translated as Lord Healer, though he was rarely associated with medicine. It is nonetheless agreed that he could be considered a healing deity. Okay. He was regarded as the king of the snakes, and as such was invoked in incantations against snakebite. Okay. So he is like a healing deity then. Many of such texts were written in Elamite and Hurrian rather than in Sumerian or Akkadian, even though they originated in Enegi. That's curious. Hurrian? I can see Elamite liked their serpent liked deities. Their deities were, a lot of them, associated with serpents. But Hurrian, that's interesting. He was also associated with vegetation and agriculture, so a multifaceted deity. Most of these deities are. I mean, most of your deities are multifaceted. They may have particular areas where they are dominant, but they have a bunch of other facets to them as well. And Ninazu is a deity like that. So it is possible that Ninazu was the oldest Sumerian god of the Netherworld. Oh, really? And that he was only overshadowed by Ereshkigal and Nergal in later periods. Well, I'm not sure about that. But I guess we'll see. He was referred to as a steward of the Great Earth. Okay? Great Earth being a euphemism for the underworld, of course. That was like that in Hittite and Hurrian texts as well. Not just Mesopotamian texts. Hittite and Hurrian were followed suit with that. And I believe Ugaritic too, like Amorite, Syrian. Or as Lord of the Underworld. Though he shared this epithet with many deities, including his son, Ningizida. Is it Ningizida? Ningishzida? I always say Ningizida, but that might not be how you pronounce that deity's name. Ningizida. Nergal, Nira, and the primordial deity Enmeshara. Yes, Ninazu was also regarded as a warrior deity, especially in Eshnuna. He was both described and possibly depicted as armed with two maces, okay? While no artistic representations of him have been identified with certainty. I'd have to look at some of my older books about that. About some deity descriptions and see if there is something there. I find that hard to believe. Have been identified with certainty. His symbols mentioned in textual sources include snakes and the snake dragon Mushusu. Oh, just like Marduk, the Mushusu. Okay. That's the Mushushu. Okay. In one of the early dynastic Zami hymns, so that's he is also compared to a black dog, known from later Mesopotamian incantations and compendiums of omens as a symbol of death. The Elam star one of the Mesopotamian names for the planet Mars, was associated with Ninazu in astronomical texts. I didn't know that. Number of deities are associated with the planet Mars I find interesting, including the Elamite god Shemut, Shemut, and of course Nergal. I mean, that's the most well-known deity that's associated with Mars is Nergal. But there's others. I mean, apparently there's others. So Ninazu is one of them. Era, of course, but I kind of Era is really closely associated with Nergal. So, all right. So associations with other deities. Let's see here. Multiple traditions regarding Ninazu's parentage existed. He was regarded either as a son of Ereshkigal and a great lord, possibly to be identified with Gugalana, known from the god list An equals Anum. Now Gugalana, that's the first husband of Ereshkigal, the queen of the underworld. His name originally meant canal inspector of the god An, the god of primordial god of heaven. An or An actually it means heaven, Sumerian for heaven, I believe. So that's Gugalana. Maybe he's another. Maybe the god Anugi is also him. The canal inspector deity. And from the myth, Inanna's descent to the Netherworld. That's a very well-known Mesopotamian myth there. So he's in that too, I guess. Who might have been analogous or to anonymous deities described as mighty cow and untamable bull, attested as his parents elsewhere. Of Enlil and Ninlil, which is an association originated in Eshnuna, but present also in other sources, including the myth Enlil and Ninlil, or of Suen, that's Sin, the moon god. Okay. So he's got different parentage here, traditions. Okay. What would be the most prevalent one, I wonder? Franz Wigerman assumes that the genealogies where Ereshkigal is listed as his mother represent the original tradition, and making Ninazu a son of Enlil and Ninlil was the result of absorption of some features of Nergal. In an early dynastic text from Shurupak, the god of Enegi, presumably Ninazu, is already referred to as Nergal of Enegi. The existence of a tradition in which Gula was Ninazu's mother, occasionally proposed in scholarship, should be considered baseless. Baseless according to Andrew George. Why, is that just like a dubious account or something? Occasionally proposed. Well, where did that come from? The god Ninmada, called the snake charmer of An, was consistently regarded as Ninazu's brother. Okay. In the myth How Grain Came to Sumer, the brothers gift grain and flax to mankind. In the myth Enlil and Ninlil, Ninazu's brothers are instead Nana, the moon god, Nergal, and Enbilulu, god of irrigation and canals. That's Enbilulu. Though he retains a connection with agriculture there nonetheless. That's interesting. He does have different parentage traditions for sure. In most sources, the goddess Ningirida is listed as Ninazu's wife. Okay. But less commonly, he could be the husband of Ukula, who is normally the wife of Tishpak. Oh, okay. Ukula is also called Ugula, Kula, and Kulab. And there are also instances where Ereshkigal is referred to as his wife rather than mother. The children of Ninazu and Ningirida were the god Ningizida and his two sisters. In a single incantation, he is also addressed as the father of the healing goddess Nintinuga. All right. The names of the two daughters associated with Ningizida vary between sources, with the best attested being Amashalama, known from a myth about the death of this god. Ooh. So Ninazu has no Sukal, which means like an attendant deity, in the major god lists, but it is possible that the viper god Ipu, or Ipahum, later known as the Sukal of Ningizida, was originally was a courtier of his father instead. According to Irene Sibbing Plantholt, he might be one in the same with the vegetation god Abu, best known from the myth Enki and Ninhursag. Oh. We'll have to see. Let's see here. Let's see, a single god. Let's see, where are we? In the god list An equals Anum, Ninazu appears in a sequence including Ereshkigal, Ningizida, Tishpak, In Shushanak, that's the Elamite god, and Ishtaran. Based on their association in god lists and similar attributes, Wigerman proposes that these gods shared a similar origin in the Trans-Tigridian area, on the border between Mesopotamian and Elamite spheres of cultural influences. Okay. Well, a single god list from the first millennium BC equates Ninazu with Ninurta and his spouse Ningirida with Ngula. Okay. An association between him and the latter goddess is also attested in the Gula hymn of Bulutsa Rabi, composed at some point between 1400 BC and 700 BC, so between the Kassite and Neo-Babylonian period. This text is considered an erotology, and it might reflect the development of a form of henotheism in late theological traditions. Okay, well, henotheism. I don't know about that. As noted by Irene Plantolt, while it has been argued in the past that this interpretation of Ninazu as a spouse of Gula goes back to the merge of Ninazu with Ninurta or Ningirsu as a son of Enlil and Ninlil, this connection may also have been established through the link between Ukula Ninazu's spouse, and Gula. Franz Wigerman notes that the hymn presents an aberrant, otherwise unknown genealogy of Ninazu, calling him an offspring of Mami. Mami is like another name for Ninhursag and Nintu. Okay. So does the word mother and like mom and mommy come like originate from mommy here? Like probably does, which according to him might or entirely depend on implicit identification with Ninurta in this context. This god is addressed as Mami's son in the Anzu myth. Okay, well, he's got a lot of parentage traditions here. See, outside of Mesopotamia, a trilingual god list from Ugarit explains Ninazu as Shiruhi, meaning is unknown, in the Hurrian column, and possibly as Il-Mutema, which means god of death in Ugaritic, in the Ugaritic language. Wow. Let's see here. All right, let's keep going here. So Ninazu's primary cult center was Enegi, a city located between Ur and Uruk. The association is first attested in an early dynastic document from Lagash. His main temple in that city was Egida, which means the sealed house or storehouse. Offerings made to him in his cult center are mentioned in tablets from Pusrish Dagon. Much like Ninazu himself, Enegi was associated with the underworld and could be described as pipe of Ereshkigal's quay. In literary texts in reference to a type of implement used in funerary libations. The cults of Enegi were likely influenced by Uruk. As in addition to Ninazu, typical Urukian deities like the messenger goddess Ninshubur, the demigod Gilgamesh, and his mother Ninsun were venerated in this city. A second cult center of Ninazu was Eshnuna, where his temple was the Essekil, which means the pure house. Franz Wigerman maintains that the Ninazu of Eshnuna was identical with the Ninazu of Enegi. However, according to Irene Plantholt, it is uncertain if the latter was indeed identical, and thus a southern deity imported to a northern city, a different deity sharing the same name, or an epithet of a separate deity identical with the name of the god of Enegi. Starting in the Akkadian period, Ninazu apparently competed with the god Tishpak in Eshnuna, and ceased to be mentioned in documents from it altogether after Hammurabi's conquest. See, that's... It is usually presumed that the latter had foreign origin, and he might have been introduced to the city as early as in the late 4th and early 3rd millennium BC. While similar in character, Ninazu and Tishpak were not fully conflated. Okay. See, I thought they might have been, but... And unlike Inanna and Ishtar or Enki and Ea, were kept apart in god lists. Oh, okay. So... So Ninazu ceased to be mentioned in documents from Eshnuna after Hammurabi's conquest and after the god Tishpak rose to power here, right? But ceasing to be mentioned there at all? That early on? In Lagash, Ninazu was one of the deities who were part of the official pantheon during the reign of Urukagina. Okay. But he is otherwise not attested there in the early dynastic period, with the exception of some theophoric personal names. Later, King Gudea built a temple to him, dedicated to him, but its precise location and ceremonial name are not known. This is a long video here. I'll be done here in a few minutes, though. From Enegi, Ninazu was also introduced to or from Enegi, where his cult survived until late periods. A temple dedicated to him in this city was also named Egida, and it has been proposed that it might have been where the center of his cult was relocated after the decline of Enegi, suggested by its absence from records from the 1st millennium BC. Other cities from which offerings to him are attested are Nippur, Umma, and Adab. In the 1st millennium BC, he was also venerated in Ashur, so Assyria, capital city of Ashur. Okay. Furthermore, the name of a temple dedicated to him, the Ekurma, House Exalted Mountain, is known from the Epic of Anzu, but its location is unknown. Okay. The last available evidence for the cult of Ninazu are theophoric personal names from invoking him, present in sources from the period of Persian rule over Mesopotamia. According to Paul Elaine Bellio, um, he must have remained a relatively popular deity in Ur. A peculiarity associated with the late worship of Ninazu in Ur is the use of both the basic form of his name and its emissal equivalent, Umunazu. Emissal means Sumerian, right? In personal names, with the latter being slightly more common. 25 names with Ninazu and 30 with Umunazu are presently known. It is possible that this situation was influenced by the role played by lamentation priests, who traditionally memorized texts written in the Emissal dialect in the survival of Ninazu's cult. Other underworld deities, like his son Ningishida, the deified snake Nira, and the incantation goddess Ningirima, also retained a degree of popularity, likely due to being envisioned as members of Ninazu's court. All right, so that ends our video here. Very interesting, the deity Ninazu. I want to do Tishpak next. But this is the god Ninazu. And as always, let me know your thoughts and comments about this deity below. Anything that you would like to add that I didn't go over or mention, feel free to do so. For sure. That's why I make these videos. Not everything, I can't include everything, but I try to include as much as I can. So yeah, let me know your thoughts and comments below, and I will be back with more deity description videos soon.